The sea does not knock, it arrives. It fills your ears with wind, your clothes with salt, and your head with thoughts you did not invite, like a second mind rising with the tide. In the Northern Isles, where the horizon is a hard line and the weather can change its mind in minutes, people learned to fear not just drowning, but being taken. The story they told was simple enough to repeat by firelight and cruel enough to last for centuries. A seal comes ashore, peels off its skin, and becomes a person. In Scots, Selkie is tied to the word for seal, a small linguistic breadcrumb that tells you this monster began as something real, seen often, hunted sometimes, and mourned more than anyone admits. That is what makes Selkie folklore different from castle vampires and forest wolves. It is born on the shoreline where the world constantly changes state. The core rule is always the same. The Selkie is free in the sea and vulnerable on land, because land requires the one thing it cannot lose, its skin. If you want origins, start with the oldest engine that powers the story. A community that lives by the sea will eventually tell tales about the sea taking payment. Boats vanish, people vanish, bodies do not always return. When grief has no proof, the mind reaches for a shape that can carry the weight of blame. Selkie stories cluster around Orkney and Shetland, the northern edge of Scotland, where Norse and Gaelic worlds brushed shoulders for generations. And the folklore speaks with that mixed accent. Not a mermaid, not a siren, not a fish-tailed fantasy, but a seal that can step into your life, barefoot, breathing air, looking almost like you. In the most common version, a man sees a Selkie woman on the shore, removes her skin, and the story calls it marriage. The Selkie calls it captivity, even if she never says the word. She lives in a house that smells like smoke instead of kelp. She raises children who belong to land, while her mind keeps turning toward the water like a compass. Years pass. The stolen skin stays hidden in a chest, under floorboards, behind a beam, wherever guilt likes to bury itself. Then one day the skin is found, sometimes by the children, sometimes by accident, sometimes because the husband finally slips. The Selkie touches it, and the whole story pivots in a single breath. She returns to the sea. The children run after her. The husband calls her name, but the ocean is louder than any human voice, and it does not negotiate. That is the romantic tragedy version, the one that travels well. But in the Northern Isles, there is another current underneath it, older, darker, and less forgiving. Selkies are not always victims. Selkie men, in some tales, are beautiful, dangerous, and temporary, arriving like a calm day that you know will end. In some island traditions, a woman who wants a Selkie lover goes to the shore, weeps into the sea, and waits. The details change, but the idea does not. Desire becomes a signal fire. Then there are the stories that feel like warnings, not romances. Humans follow Selkies into the water and do not return, as if love is just another kind of undertow. If you want a named anchor point, the Ballad of the Great Selkie of Sul Skerry is one of the most famous Selkie narratives, tied to Orkney and Shetland tradition. In that story, a woman bears a child by a Selkie father, and fate tightens like a net around all of them. Love does not save anyone, it only makes the ending sharper. Folklore does this often. It takes ordinary fears, pregnancy, abandonment, poverty, violence, and gives them a mythic mask so the community can talk about them without naming names. Now push farther out into the North Atlantic. In the Faroe Islands, there is a famous Selkie legend called Kappakonan, the seal woman, tied to Mikladler on Kalsoy. The outline is familiar. Seals come ashore on a winter night, shed skins, become human, and dance until sunrise. Until a man steals one skin and forces one woman to stay. She becomes a wife, bears children, and waits for the day the sea will open its hand again. When she finally finds the key, she does something chilling. She hides knives and smothers the fire to protect her human children before she leaves. In the Faroes telling, the story does not end with longing. It ends with consequence. A curse that follows the men of the village, framed as punishment for violating the sea and the Selkie family. This is the pattern across the North Atlantic. The Selkie is not just a creature, it is a moral boundary. Take what does not belong to you, and the water takes something back. People sometimes ask if these legends are just metaphor, but the more useful question is why the same metaphor repeats. In places that share trade routes, storms, and generations of missing bodies. Even modern travel writing notes how these stories echo from Orkney to the Faroes and beyond, carried back and forth by fishermen and traders who shared more than cargo. There is also a real-world spark that may have fed the Selkie shape. Historic accounts from the Northern Isles describe sightings of Finmen, people in kayaks, recorded in the late 1600s. Two islanders who rarely saw such craft, a figure gliding silently across gray water, could look like a sea being wearing a second skin. A kayak hauled onto shore can resemble an animal hide, and the human inside can seem to appear from it. This does not explain every Selkie story, and it does not need to. Folklore is not a police report. It is a living system that folds new sights into old fears. Now, return to the skin, because that is the most powerful symbol in the entire tradition. The skin is identity. It is home. It is the one item that cannot be replaced. And once it is stolen, the Selkie becomes property. That is why Selkie stories feel modern, even when they are ancient. The monster is not teeth. The monster is consent, being ignored while the world calls it love. And yet, the Selkie is never fully domesticated, even in versions where she is kind. Even in versions where the husband is not painted as cruel, the sea keeps pulling, because the story refuses to let captivity become normal. Some traditions say Selkies return to visit their children, appearing as a seal close to shore, watching, lingering, unable to cross back into the life they left behind. It is tenderness that cannot enter the room. The Selkie is also a perfect shoreline myth because it lives in the liminal, neither fully human nor fully animal, neither fully land nor fully sea, always a step away from slipping out of your world. That liminal nature is why Selkies sit beside other northern water beings, Finnfolk, Merfolk, Trolls, Kelpies, stories that all warn the same thing. The edges of the world are where you disappear. So what is the origin, really? It is seals. It is storm death. It is island loneliness. It is the terror of loving someone who belongs to a world you cannot follow. And it is the oldest horror of coastal life that the sea is beautiful enough to worship and hungry enough to take you anyway.